where we bridge science, nutrition, and functional medicine to help you heal from the inside out. I've heard from several people that I am they don't understand the words that I'm doing. So now I'm going to be helping to soften so everybody can understand. So I'm Kim Larson. I'm a certified functional nutrition coach, Fast Like a Girl coach, and founder of LarsonNutrition.com and LarsonBotanicals.com. So last week we looked at ultra processed foods and from a biological lens, uh, looking at population data and dopamine signaling and insulin response, fat cell behavior, and the gut microbiome. And today I want to go deeper into this. We're going to break down what happens inside the body from the cellular signaling to the gut brain connection and how the modern food environment shapes those systems. Because ultra processed foods now make up close to 60% of total caloric intake for US adults, even more for adolescents, for the children in our worlds. According to National Nutrition Survey data that researchers have analyzed and published over time, when most calories come from industrial food products instead of real foods, the body adapts to that environment, and those adaptations show up in metabolism, inflammation, appetite, and long term disease patterns. A lot of these diseases don't just pop up like immediately, it takes time, right? So the heart attack that people are having in their 50s and 60s started in their 20s. All these diseases happen from years of this abuse of adding all these toxic, highly processed foods. And again, last week I talked about, I don't know if you've seen these vats are probably as big as this whole room. And they're just churning up the ingredients, and somebody's putting in a bucket of this and a bucket of that, or people are just putting in these buckets of, I'm like, oh my God, when you look at that, it's like if you just had spinach with some cucumber and tomatoes, or like I had a salad the other day with cucumbers and tomatoes because I had some cucumbers and tomatoes I needed to use up. And I put in some lemon juice and extra virgin olive oil and a little bit of balsamic vinegar. It was delicious. Or you could use red wine vinegar or whatever you have. But these are just whole, nutritious foods that you can use. So let's start with the fats, because this is one of the most misunderstood parts of the ultra processed food conversation. Over the last century, the types of fats in the American diet changed dramatically. Industrial seed oils became a major part of the food supply, especially soybean oil. These oils are used everywhere because they're cheap. They're shelf stable, they're easy to transport, and easy to blend into packaged foods and restaurant meals. These oils are rich in linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fat. Linoleic acid is essential. Omega-6 fats are essential, meaning that the body can't make it. We have to consume some of it, but not as much as people are consuming. And the issue is dose balance, right? So in the early 1990s, estimates suggest that linoleic acid intake was roughly 2 to 3% of calories. And today, many people are closer to 7 to 10%, sometimes even more, depending on how much packaged food and restaurant food is in the diet. Over the same period, omega-3 intake did not rise in the same way. Now, omega-3s come from a fish oil. Like I take Zinzino fish oil. I like the garlic, but they got fruity tooty and they got some other flavors. But I can tell you that when I have my tests done, my omega-3s are in the 1 percentile across the country. And my omega-6, those are low because I started to avoid them completely. And my body can't make the omega-6s. So I need to start putting in a little bit. Doesn't mean I'm going to eat highly processed foods. I'm just going to eat foods more frequently that have some omega-6 in it. So the balance shifted. There's a free app called Suppco, Suppco, and you can check the quality of your supplements there. And if you're not taking any supplements, you need to start at least taking um, a, a complete multivitamin. So I was surprised to find that an organic supplement that I was taking was rated poor. It's an ashwagandha, and that just kind of helps regulate your mood, helps you sleep better. It just balances out your stress. So I'm working through changing up my supplements using this app one by one, where they were rated poor. Most of my vitamins were fine. They were rated really well. But here's a simple reason that matters when it comes to fats like omega-3 / omega-6. The fats you eat become part of your body. Every cell has an outer layer that's built largely from fat. And that outer layer isn't just a wrapper, it affects how the cell communicates, how it responds to hormones like insulin, and how it handles inflammation. When omega-6 fats dominate what you're eating, more omega-6 fats become part of that cell structure. And that shifts the raw materials the body uses to create inflammatory signals. Linoleic acid can be converted into arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is stored in that outer layer of the cell. Then, when the body experiences stress, injury, or immune activation, enzymes release arachidonic acid. It's a fatty acid involved in inflammation and cell signaling in the body. And the body turns it into short lived chemical messengers that help coordinate inflammation. This is how the body is designed to work. If you like sprain an ankle or you get an infection, you want inflammation to do its job. These signals help regulate swelling, pain signaling, immune response, blood flow, even clotting. They help the body respond quickly. The issue is what happens when the body has a constant oversupply of the raw material to make these inflammatory signals. When omega-6 intake stays high day after day after day, the body has more arachidonic acid available. More raw material means the body can produce more of these inflammatory signals more easily. And over time, the baseline inflammation setting in the body can rise. Inflammation at this level is often quiet and gradual. You don't notice it, you don't see it. Maybe you start feeling a little off, but it's so gradual that you start feeling off, and you feel more off and more off, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't feel well. Over time, it can appear as insulin resistance. And doctors don't test you for insulin resistance, but it shows up as high blood pressure, stubborn weight gain, elevated triglycerides, fatty liver, which is rising, joint pain, mood shifts, and increased cardiovascular risk. Omega-3 fats matter here because they influence the same system, but in a different direction. Omega-3 fats are used to create signals that tend to calm inflammation and support resolution after an immune response. So when omega-6 is high and omega-3 is low, the overall pattern shifts. Now add in the second layer, heat and oxidation. Many ultra processed foods are fried or manufactured with heat or cooked in oils that are used again and again and heated repeatedly. Certain fats, especially polyunsaturated fats like linoleic acid, are more fragile when exposed to heat, oxygen, and time. And when these oils break down, they form oxidative compounds. And oxidized compounds are fats that have been chemically damaged by heat, air, or light. You don't need to know the names of these compounds. The important point is that oxidized oils increase cell stress. They create a more inflammatory environment inside the body, and they can strain mitochondria. Your mitochondria are your powerful engines in your body. They're the parts of your cells that produce energy. If mitochondria are constantly under stress, energy production becomes less efficient. And when energy production becomes less efficient, the body becomes more metabolically stressed. This is one reason the quality of fat in the food supply matters. Not just the amount of fat or the calories, it's part of the structural environment your cells live in. Now let's move into insulin signaling in a way that makes sense for everyone. Insulin is a messenger hormone. After you eat, your blood sugar rises, your insulin is released to help move that sugar out of the bloodstream and into your cells, mainly muscle and liver. So it can be used for energy or stored. And in a healthy system, insulin's message is heard clearly. Cells respond, sugar moves into the cells, blood sugar comes down. Over time, in an environment of chronic excess calories, frequent refined carbohydrate intake, and ongoing inflammation, insulin's message starts getting garbled. It's like the cell becomes less responsive to the signals. The pancreas has to produce more insulin to get the same effect, and that's insulin resistance. And doctors, like I said, are not testing for insulin. They'll test for your glucose, but they don't test for your insulin. And the insulin resistance starts the glucose increase. So one of the deeper reasons that happens is that when the body is constantly dealing with excess energy, fat starts to build up inside places it wasn't designed to store a lot of fat, like inside muscle cells and liver cells. And when that happens, certain fat byproducts accumulate inside those cells, and this is dangerous. Again, you don't need the chemical names. The key point is these byproducts interfere with the insulin signal inside the cell. So the cell doesn't open the door for glucose as easily. Glucose stays in the bloodstream longer. The pancreas increases insulin output to compensate. Over time, fasting insulin rises, and often long before fasting glucose rises, where your testing would show if you are pre-diabetic. Again, doctors don't test you for insulin output, and they should to catch this cycle sooner. One of the next places is insulin resistance. It shows up in the liver. And the liver plays a central role in how the body manages fuel. So when glucose enters the bloodstream after a meal, insulin helps guide that glucose into the muscle cells to be used for energy. But when insulin signaling becomes less efficient, more glucose stays in circulation. The liver begins trying to help manage that excess fuel. And when the liver is exposed to repeated waves of glucose and insulin, it starts converting some of that extra glucose into fat. And this is where you start to see, there's even people who are skinny fat because they have all this fat around their organs. And that is the dangerous. This is the heart attacks. This is the high triglycerides. This is the stroke. You talk about diseases that are happening in our 50s and 60s because of stuff that we've been doing since our 20s, our 30s, our 40s. You've got to clean this up. This process is part of the normal metabolism, but when it happens constantly, fat begins to accumulate inside liver cells. And this is how fatty liver disease can develop even in people who don't drink much alcohol. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is on the rise. Over time, the liver becomes less efficient at managing both glucose and fat. And as more fat builds up inside liver cells, the liver begins releasing more fat particles into the bloodstream. And these fat particles show up on bloodstream tests as triglycerides. Elevated triglycerides are one of the earliest warning signs that metabolism is becoming strained. They often rise alongside insulin resistance and increased abdominal fat. And I can tell you that I went through this in my 40s. All of a sudden, I had all of this Fat accumulation. I was eating, cookie dough and I was putting it fresh and baking it in the oven. Oh my God, the house smells so wonderful. And I was eating pizza and I was eating all kinds of highly processed foods. Then all of a sudden I had high triglycerides, I had prediabetes, I had high blood pressure, I I was 45 pounds overweight. I just had all kinds of stuff going on. The doctor wanted to put me on all these medications and I said, no. I will lose the weight. I am not going to go on medications because I got family members who have, you know, a table full of medications that they're taking, and I don't want to go there. So I lost the 45 pounds and I am so grateful. And that's what changed me to get into nutrition, health, and learning about all these toxins. So when triglycerides stay high over time, they contribute to cardiovascular risk because they influence how cholesterol particles behave in the bloodstream. And this is why metabolic health is not just about body weight, it's about how the body handles fuel. When insulin signaling improves through structured meals, increasing your protein and fiber intake, strength training, and improve your metabolic flexibility with fasting and proper nutrition, the liver begins processing glucose and fat more efficiently again. Fat accumulation in the liver can decrease. Triglyceride levels often fall. Blood sugar regulation improves. And this all happened for me as well. Now, I didn't have fatty liver disease, but if I continued on that route, I bet I would have had it. That fat accumulation, that blood sugar regulation, all of those levels came down. And the liver is remarkably adaptable when the metabolic environment changes. This is why so many people can have normal glucose on a lab test and still have an insulin problem. The insulin problem is often the early warning sign. So if you're gaining weight and your doctor says, oh, your glucose is fine, you might want to have your doctor check your insulin and see where your insulin is because you want to make sure that you're getting it early so that you can address it early. In the United States, a large portion of adults meet criteria for prediabetes, and many people are on that track without even knowing it because we don't always measure the right markers early enough, like the insulin. This is where strength training becomes one of the most powerful tools we have. Muscle is the main place where glucose goes when insulin is working well. Muscle is like a sponge for glucose. When you build muscle, you increase the body's ability to clear glucose from the bloodstream. And when you contract muscle through resistance training, muscle can pull the glucose into the cell even when insulin signaling is not perfect. And this is one reason why strength training improves insulin sensitivity so reliably. It increases your storage space for glucose. It improves how the cell handles fuel. It helps reduce fat buildup in muscle and liver over time, and it improves mitochondrial function. That's why inside Larson Nutrition programs, strength training is treated as metabolic therapy. The workouts are designed to build lean mass and improve metabolic function. And nutrition is structured to support that. Adequate protein, consistent meals, fiber-dense foods, and smart pairing of carbohydrates. So if you want recipes, workouts, and education built around those exact goals, improving insulin sensitivity, rebuilding muscle, and stabilizing appetite, you can explore larsonnutrition.com. It's structured education loaded with health tips. Now let's move into gut-brain axis. Your gut and brain are constantly communicating through nerves, hormones, and immune signals. And the gut microbiome, your intestinal bacteria, plays a big role in this. When you eat fiber from real foods, that fiber reaches the colon and becomes fuel for beneficial bacteria. And those bacteria produce compounds called short chain fatty acids. And one of the most important short chain fatty acid is butyrate. Butyrate supports the gut lining. It helps maintain the barrier between the gut and the bloodstream. It also helps regulate inflammation, and it influences hormones that control appetite and blood sugar. And this matters because ultra-processed diets tend to be low in fermented fiber, like kefir or sauerkraut or yogurt. People might be eating calories, but the gut bacteria aren't getting the materials they need to create those beneficial compounds. Now, vegetables also have a lot of fiber. So does fruit, whole fruit, not fruit juice or sugary drinks. You need to actually eat the fruit, right? I mean, I see people making juices and they'll put in 5 huge things of celery, and then they'll put in 2 apples, and then they'll put in 3 cucumbers. Could you imagine trying to eat that food if you ate that much fiber? Now, when you put it through the blender and make juice out of it, it takes all the fiber out of it. So when that fiber intake stays low, microbial diversity often decreases. Lower diversity has been associated with obesity, insulin resistance, and higher inflammatory markers in many studies. Now connect that to appetite and blood sugar control. When the gut produces more of these beneficial compounds, the gut releases hormones that help regulate appetite and glucose handling. One of those hormones is GLP-1, and another is peptide YY. You don't need to memorize these names. The important point is that what they do, what they help you feel full, because they help you feel full. They slow digestion, and they help the body handle blood sugar more smoothly. A fiber-rich diet supports your gut bacteria. Your gut bacteria produce helpful compounds, and those compounds support hormone signals that regulate appetite and glucose. You get fiber from vegetables, fruit, legumes, and lentils. Now add the nerve connection, the vagus nerve. It's one of the major information highways between the gut and the brain. When the gut is inflamed or the microbiome is disrupted, signaling to the brain changes that influence stress resilience. That can influence stress resilience. The mood, the reward signaling. It can influence cravings. This is why people can feel like their appetite is off when their diet is low in fiber and high in ultra-processed foods. I can tell you that when I have grilled chicken and I have some broccoli and some spinach with it, I'm not hungry for hours. I'll have 6 ounces, probably 6 ounces of chicken. And then I'll have about a cup of broccoli and a cup of spinach. I am not hungry for 4 or 5 hours. That is natural GLP-1. The gut is not sending the same stabilizing signals when you're eating high ultra-processed foods. This creates a loop, right? The food structure shapes the microbiome. The microbiome shapes the appetite signals. And the brain signaling influences what food you reach for. So let's dive into food engineering, because this is a huge part of why ultra-processed foods dominate. Ultra-processed foods are engineered by the food industry to maximize taste, convenience, shelf life, preservatives, and repeat purchases. Researchers have identified hyperpalatable foods by analyzing how foods combine sugar, fat, salt, and refined carbohydrates in ways that strongly stimulate the brain's reward system. The bliss point is the food industry's term for that precise level of sweetness and salt and fat that creates the strongest pleasure response while keeping you wanting more. These products are tested repeatedly to hit those targets. Ooh, I want more of that. Ooh, I'm not full yet. I gotta have more. This is what they do. They engineer it so that it affects your brain. The texture is engineered too. Foods that dissolve quickly and require little chewing are easier to eat quickly. Fast eating matters because the body's fullness signals take time to rise. And if you eat quickly, you can consume a lot of calories before your brain gets the message that you've had enough. Studies show people eating highly processed foods ate 500 calories more than people eating whole plant and animal foods. This shows up clearly in a famous NIH study led by Kevin Hall. I talked about this in the last podcast, first part of highly processed foods. Participants lived in a controlled research setting and ate either a mostly ultra processed diet or a mostly unprocessed diet for 2 weeks each. The meals were matched in many ways, including macronutrients. Participants could eat as much as they wanted on the ultra processed, as much as they wanted. But on the ultra processed diet, people ate about 500 more calories per day and gained weight. And on the unprocessed diet, they naturally ate less and they lost weight. Ta-da! Isn't that amazing? Just eat unprocessed foods. You'll eat naturally less and you'll lose weight. And one of the major differences was eating rate. Ultra processed foods were eaten faster because they're engineered to break down quickly. And so you have to eat more before you ever feel full. They also tended to be more energy dense, these ultra processed foods. So when eating rate is faster and energy density is higher, intake rises before fullness signals catch up. This is why telling people just eat less often fails in an ultra processed environment. The environment is designed to increase intake. Now layer in economics. Ultra processed foods are built on commodity crops like corn, soy, and wheat. And those ingredients are cheap. They're shelf stable because they can put in all these preservatives to preserve them. They're easy to ship, they're easy to store, and easy to market. The cost per calorie tends to be low, but the cost per nutrient is much higher. Fresh foods often require refrigeration and preparation time. And time scarcity matters. Many families are balancing work and life demands. Ultra processed foods are fast, they're marketed heavily, they're everywhere. So when affordability, convenience, shelf stability, and marketing are all aligned, daily exposure becomes predictable. Biology adapts to predictable exposure. So let's talk about recalibration, because this is where people need practical hope. When someone reduces ultra-processed foods and builds meals with adequate protein, fiber, and balanced fats, the body begins shifting within days. So on that meal that I talked about where I had chicken, now I made, I think 3 pounds of chicken, right? And I'm eating it every day, and so is my husband. And then I'm making the broccoli and I put a little grass-fed butter on there. And it's just amazing. It fills you up. That was the healthy fat, was the tablespoon of grass-fed butter. So what happens in the body is in the first week, the blood sugar swings often narrow. Energy becomes more stable because the spike and crash pattern becomes less frequent. Many people notice fewer crashes in the afternoon. Like I don't get tired in the afternoon. I have a nice level, energy levels throughout the day. Now, yesterday was a very stressful day. There's a lot going on. I got to do this. I got to do that. Taxes are coming up. I got to make candles. I got to make more product for what's coming up. There's just a lot going on. So I was a little stressed. And what happened was I had to take a nap. Now I had only 6 hours of sleep because my brain was running of all these things I got to do. And I woke up in the morning and then it all hit my head and I had to So what happens in the second week is taste sensitivity often begins to shift. Foods that were once normal start tasting overly sweet or overly salty, the natural flavors become more noticeable. The brain's reward system adapts as well. Ultra processed foods are high stimulation foods. When exposure decreases, the brain gradually becomes more responsive to lower stimulation foods. Cravings often becomes less urgent over time. And habits play a role here too. The brain stores repeated patterns, snacking routines, eating at certain times, reaching for certain foods in response to stress. And those patterns don't disappear overnight. They change through repetition. This is why consistency matters more than perfection, because every meal built around protein, vegetables, and fiber, whole foods strengthens a new pattern. By weeks 3 and 4, appetite rhythms often become more predictable. Fullness signals become clearer. Many people feel like they can go longer between meals without white knuckling it. I got to have a snack because the ultra palatable foods want you to keep having more, eating more, eating more, eating more. The inflammation markers often begin trending down over weeks to months when diet quality improves and strength training is consistent. Even if you just do a little bit every day, start somewhere. Start with 5 minutes of strength training. Do some planks, do some sit ups, do your body weight first. Then move on to picking up a 5 pound weight or a 10 pound weight or a 20 pound weight. Depending how strong you are today, it really does make a difference. So often, triglycerides often respond quickly to reductions in refined carbohydrates and improve fat quality. Mine did. I literally just changed what I was eating from all the highly processed foods to regular whole nutritious foods. And it's amazing. Within 4 months, I lost 45 pounds. I started lifting weights. I hired a trainer. I started, running outdoors. And what a difference it made. Fasting insulin can improve over 4 to 8 weeks when meals are structured and strength training is implemented. Your waist circumference can decline as visceral fat decreases and insulin signaling improves. Metabolic flexibility improves. That means the body becomes better at switching between using carbohydrates and using fat for fuel. Of course, depending on activity and demand. This is recalibration. It's not a crash, it's a shift in inputs, leading to a shift in signals. Strength training accelerates it. As muscle mass increases, glucose disposal improves because remember, muscle is a place to dump glucose. And the more muscle you have, the more the glucose can go in there. So every time you eat, you get a glucose spike. Now, depending on what you eat, depends on how much glucose spike you get. But muscle is your glucose disposal. Cellular energy production improves. Insulin burden decreases over time. Inside Larson Nutrition programs, this process is structured. Protein is distributed across meals. Fiber targets are built in through real food. Resistance training is progressive. Sleep is treated as a metabolic input. You need to get your sleep. You need to own that. You need to make sure that it happens. Education helps people understand why each piece matters. If you want that structure, free recipes, free workouts, free healthy insights in blogs, education you can explore at larsonnutrition.com. It's designed to make concepts practical. This is another layer that people often ignore: environmental exposure. If you're looking to lower inflammation and improve metabolic function, what you're exposed to in your home and on your skin matters too. Synthetic fragrances, indoor air pollutants, certain chemicals from cleaners, nonstick pans, carpeting, materials that don't wrinkle, synthetic fibers, seasoned pans, waterproof clothing, all contribute to total stress load in the body. That's why Larson Botanicals exists. Larson Botanicals focuses on non-toxic skincare and clean burning candles. Because again, I love a clean smelling home, but I don't want all the toxins. And it's designed to reduce unnecessary chemical burden while you're making changes from the inside out. People underestimate how much daily exposure comes from what we put on our skin and breathe in our homes. I can tell you, I had an air freshener plug in every room of my home. I liked a fresh smelling home, and it was overwhelming to others. And this is how our bodies get cysts and growths in our body. This is our body's way of holding the toxins and trying to protect our bodies. You can explore these non-toxic products at larsonbotanicals.com as part of building a low burden environment that aligns with your health goals. Get rid of the plastic Tupperware. Start getting rid of the plastic water bottles. All of these things add to the toxins in your body. Slowly start replacing. I haven't replaced all of my plastic clothes yet because there's some stuff that I really love. But what I do is I made sure like all my socks are wool socks. Even my little running socks are wool socks. My tanks are cotton. My t-shirts are cotton. I'm making sure that I'm getting rid of, there's some pants that I have though they have all kinds of pockets in them, and I just love them. I have to get rid of them. But I'm working my way to changing everything. We have all of our bedding is cotton. I have silk pillowcase. We're just working through everything that we can. So how does a cumulative input over time? Now let's bring it all together. Ultra processed foods influence the fats that become part of our cells. They increase exposure to high omega-6 load and oxidized oils. They contribute to an environment where inflammation rises quietly over time. And they disrupt insulin signaling by prompting fuel overloads inside cells. They reduce fiber intake and shift the microbiome in ways that disrupt appetite and blood sugar regulation. They are engineered for hyperpalatable reward response. They are designed to be eaten quickly. They are cheap, convenient, and heavily marketed. And in the United States, where ultra-processed foods make up close to 60% of the calories, these mechanisms operate daily. Cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death. Type 2 diabetes continues to rise. Fatty liver disease affects a growing percentage of adults and children. And these trends reflect how food structure, metabolic signaling, and environment intact over time. So when ultra-processed foods dominate, metabolic signaling trends toward instability. When structure is restored, whole foods, adequate protein, fiber density, progressive resistance training, consistent sleep, and reduced environmental burden signaling trends toward resilience. This is metabolic recalibration, and it is achievable. You can listen to the Larson Health Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and watch full episodes live on YouTube. I share continued insights and snippets on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, where we continue this conversation around metabolic health, nutrition, strength training, and hormone resilience. And if you're ready to rebuild your foundation through structured nutrition, research-based recipes, progressive strength training, and ongoing metabolic education, visit larsonnutrition.com. And if you're working toward reducing cumulative environmental burden while supporting your body from the outside in, explore the non-toxic skincare and clean burning candles at larsonbotanicals.com. And thank you for listening today. I look forward to continuing this conversation